I just wanted to ask, what led you to develop this lecture series? I mean, why do you think that fashion is an important thing to discuss?
Well, many things. First of all, it is one of my fields of study and expertise, and I've been writing on fashion for years now. So, in that way, it's quite natural to me. But that is not at all the main reason. The main reason is that, as you probably know, the new strategic plan for the university under President Poser stresses very strongly interdisciplinarity. That is the one of the main goals of future plans for the university. And fashion works really, really well with that because fashion is a language through which you can discuss anthropology, biology, psychology, art and design, history, sustainability and environmental studies, ethics, business, virtually everything falls under its rubric. And at the same time, it's an extremely popular topic, and it has a footprint both in the academic world and in the journalistic world, in the media world, of course, in the world of design and industry. And so it's kind of got tentacles everywhere. And it's a very good sort of wedge issue through which to open up larger conversations. So it's a sort of attractive, delicious subject, but it has a lot of grounding in many fascinating academic disciplines.
Could you give just, a quick overview of the ways in which fashion extends not just to what the casual listener might think of fashion as something that they just put on every day, but I mean, in every aspect of our lives, like you mentioned, journalism, industry, design?
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that because the first thing I would say is that the series this season is not at all for fashionistas or fashion experts or people who are obsessed with fashion, although they are most welcome and will enjoy it in their own way. Fashion is about a communication that we all participate in. And whether you are fanatically interested in the minutia of fashion or a person who wears jeans and a t-shirt every day, you are speaking the language as part of your daily interactions with the world. And what we're focusing on this semester is to look at that communication and what we can learn from it from all points of view. So there's no wrong way to participate in fashion, but the first step for me to talk about it is to demonstrate that we're all already part of it, whether we realize it or not. And most of us respond to one another visually. That's a very big part of communication. I think psychologists say something like 80 or 90% of communication is nonverbal. And a lot of that happens through visual cues, not all, of course. And visual cues occur to a very large extent through what we're wearing. So learning to read the world that way, or simply becoming more conscious of how you are already doing that. Because my theory is we're all interested in fashion. We just don't always realize that's what we're thinking about. It's a very exciting new way to think about our daily life. The other thing is, fashion is an interesting realm that combines a lot of academic disciplines that I just rattled off, but also a lot of extracurricular things that we all do for fun anyway, including shopping, socializing, travel, which are not necessarily literally about clothing items, but are about the recreational aspect of fashion. So it makes for an excellent crossover topic, which kind of breaks through the walls of the university a little bit. The Institute is certainly not going to be devoted to fashion entirely. That's just this season. But it is devoted to breaking down barriers between inside a university and outside a university.
On that note of how the lecture series isn't just for fashionistas, I mean, the speakers for the series, they range from not just designers, but to fashion critics, to executives, to authors. I mean, how did you choose the speakers for this lecture series? What was that process like? And why did you choose to have such a diverse range of speakers?
Well, number one, because I am trying to get at the panorama of fashion studies and fashion as a field. And so I certainly didn't want it to be in any one silo of fashion. Second thing is I wanted to give students as broad viewpoint as possible because of the career aspect too. I'm very interested in showing students paths from academic subjects to, for lack of a better term, real world application. I don't love that because we are in the real world at the university, but commercial and career-based opportunities. And so to have someone who's an executive, to have someone who's a journalist, an activist, a designer, these people all represent, and they're all at the very top of their fields. They can not only talk about the subject matter, they can speak about the trajectories of their careers. And many of them have quite diverse and extensive background in multiple fields. And so I really want students to come and hear from people who've done all kinds of interesting work that have led them to exciting creative careers in maybe fields that are unexpected.
And real quick, jumping into your own work, you write the Face Forward column for the New York Times. And I was looking over some of your work, and I noticed that in some of the more recent columns that you've written, a lot of them have been centered on womanhood, aging, the concept of ugliness, and the concept of beauty. I know right now we're in a very tumultuous landscape of beauty and fashion. I think that we're in a very exciting time. I think it's quickly changing right now. So, I mean, what personally causes you to gravitate towards those topics?
I think we are in a tumultuous time in many ways, and we are in a time when we are looking at how to diversify and make more just many of our social behaviors. And I'm always mindful of the fact that ageism and lookism are in some ways the last prejudices to go. Ageism goes hand in hand with issues of feminism and misogyny. And you are a very young woman, and I am much older. And over the years, just personal experience and those of my many friends have taught me how surprising it can be older as a woman and confront some very troubling stereotypes that persist and are in our culture, even as we try to be better on so many other fronts. And so, because I am fortunate enough to have this platform, I am trying to orient some of my work towards thinking about womanhood through the entire span of a woman's life so that we can reclaim the excitement and the beauty and the pleasures of the second half of life and not just sort of make invisible this entire enormous segment of the population.
And you touched on this a little bit when you mentioned how the concepts of aging and outward appearance are very much connected to feminism and misogyny. I'm aware that you're currently writing a book about fashion and politics,
Yeah.
and so could you expand a little bit on that connection between fashion and politics? I mean, I don't think people really understand the way fashion, I've always thought, is very reflective of our society in terms of politics and in terms of what we value. But can you expand on that in your own research?
Yes. Well, to begin with, fashion is the realm in which culture literally touches your body. It is the only realm, aside from the culinary arts, in which your body is in literal direct contact with a product of culture. And therefore, it is very intimate and also very charged. And while fashion is certainly not just for women at all, clearly, it is associated with women primarily, and I would add with gay men. There are reasons for that historically, but both of those groups are traditionally marginalized or trivialized. And so fashion often, despite its incredible pervasive historical power, is often lumped into a category of trivial, recreational, marginal things, much like the people who are associated with fashion. When you start considering what we push aside, this is kind of a basic psychoanalytic concept, right? That we need to pay attention to what we push aside the most. What are we refusing to look at? What do we make fun of? What do we ridicule? Fashion is often in that category. And I can tell you, even in my own experience, this was not always a field of study of mine. I have a PhD in comparative literature. I did literary studies. I taught theater studies, dance studies. I've done a lot of other somewhat more traditional academic fields. And when I started to move into fashion, I got flack from colleagues and people in my professional life who thought I was becoming kind of, I was doing something less important. And that just fires me up more. And I realized that any area that gets so much dismissal must be pretty powerful. And so I'm evolving a concept I call pink politics. Pink because we associate it mainly with women's things, but it's about opening up that cave, if you will, that we throw everything into and put a boulder in front of to see what we can tease out about the parts of culture that we diminish. And very often they reveal a great deal. And it's not as simple as, oh, this political character, this politician wore a blue suit and that means X. Often it has more to do with how we respond to people telegraphing things about sexuality or about gender identity or about social class or even about pleasure. I've taught classes on fashion, and I often have a lot of women students, unsurprisingly. And I can remember a young woman student, wonderful girl, who came up to me after class and said, I'm very distressed because after this class, I had a plan to go with my friend shopping at the mall. But now that we've read all of these texts about fashion and psychology and social class, I feel like I shouldn't go because I'm just participating in this commercial transaction and I don't know, maybe I should just not do that. And I said, no, no, no. My goal is not to keep you from having pleasurable experiences, but rather to go and do those things and then think about what it is that brought you pleasure. Think about what you're engaging, which is not just buying, it's also about bonding with another woman or a friend or your mother. Another political realm of fashion is that it often is a communal language between generations of women. I used to go shopping as a girl with my mother, and I often give talks to groups, and I'll see a grandmother with her granddaughter, and they'll come and talk to me afterward and say, we find we have this in common. Um, that's a serious connection that we should look at. Sports does that for a lot of people too, but this is a realm in which women often communicate with delight cross-generationally. That's worth looking at.
You are the director for the brand new Institute for the Public Humanities and the Arts, and you mentioned earlier that this series is very much focused on fashion, but do you have any plans for the future, for any future series, or just for the future of the Institute in general?
Oh, I have many plans. Um, we will be doing a great deal of things. We will be doing lecture series, programs, performances. I am working on study abroad programs. I'm also collaborating with faculty across the university to work on new ways for the faculty to communicate their work in across different disciplines. And in conjunction with my colleagues, I'm thinking about a theme for next year that will be different from this year's, but will build on it. And you can be sure it will always have an interdisciplinary aspect to it, and it will always have political aspects to it. Um, and probably, I have to say, some feminist aspects to it as well.